trapped Apache woman feared he'd kill her. Instead, the cowboy took her as his wife. Maria ran through the dry, rocky canyon, her small feet kicking up clouds of dust with every desperate step. The sun had begun its slow descent behind the jagged mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, but it brought her no comfort. The desert, so beautiful from afar, felt like a trap closing in on her. Every cactus, every shadow of a rock seemed to whisper danger. Her heart pounded in her chest and her breath came in quick, sharp gasps. She didn't know where to go, only that she could not stay. Earlier that day, she had been traveling with her family and the rest of her Apache group, moving carefully through the plains to avoid hostile settlers and wandering bandits. The Apache people had learned over generations how to survive in these harsh lands, how to read the wind and the patterns of animals, how to find water where none seemed to exist. But even the best knowledge could not protect her from misfortune. A group of raiders had surprised them, scattering her family in all directions. In the chaos, she had been separated, running blindly as fear drove her onward. Now, alone and lost, Maria felt a deep, gnawing fear. She could hear the soft crunch of stones behind her, too regular to be the wind or the rustle of desert animals. She dared not look back, for the stories she had grown up with had taught her that if a predator spotted fear in its prey, it would not hesitate. Every instinct she had screamed at her to flee, to hide, to find a place where no one could reach her. Her mind raced. Where could she go? The canyon walls were steep, jagged, and unforgiving. She had no weapon, no companion, no way to defend herself. Even the smallest sound, her own ragged breathing or the snap of a twig beneath her foot, could give away her position. She thought of her family, of the warmth of her mother's embrace, and tears stung her eyes. She had never been so afraid in her life. And yet, the fear that someone was pursuing her, someone who might mean her harm, was stronger than any other. Then, through the orange haze of sunset, she saw him. A lone figure, tall and solid against the canyon wall, with a wide-brimmed hat that cast his face in shadow. He was holding something long in his hands. A rifle, she realized with a jolt, and he was watching her. Every story she had ever heard about cowboys and settlers, about strangers who could be merciless, surged into her mind. She froze for a moment, heart hammering. Should she run? Should she hide? There was nowhere to go, nowhere to climb, nowhere to escape. Maria's eyes darted across the landscape. The canyon walls were steep, jagged, and dry. A few scattered shrubs offered almost no cover. Every step she had taken had led her closer to a dead end, and now she felt trapped. Her mind went blank with terror. What would happen to her if you raised that rifle? Would this be the end of her life? She swallowed hard, trying to steady her shaking hands. She had heard stories from the elders of Apache women taken by strangers, and the thought of it made her stomach churn. She wished she could disappear into the earth itself. But then, as if sensing her fear, the man lowered the rifle slightly. He didn't move closer immediately. He simply watched, his stance steady, calm, and unhurried. Maria blinked, uncertain. Was this hesitation a trick? Was he planning something worse? Or was he different? Every part of her screamed to stay away, but she also realized she couldn't run. She had nowhere to run. Her mind flicked back to lessons her mother had taught her, lessons of survival and reading people. Watch carefully, her mother had said, because even in the worst danger, understanding the other can give you power. She studied him as best she could. The sun glinted off his hat, highlighting sharp, weathered features. He seemed strong, confident, but not cruel, or at least not in a way she could yet tell. His eyes, shadowed beneath the brim, were fixed on her, steady and calm, not filled with rage. Maria swallowed hard. Her muscles ached from running. She could feel the sweat on her skin, the sting of scratches from thorns and bushes along the canyon floor. Fear coiled in her chest like a live thing, but there was also a spark of curiosity. Why hadn't he attacked yet? Was it because he was waiting for her to make a mistake? Or was it something else? She forced herself to take a step backward, testing the canyon's edge. Every movement was careful, deliberate. Her mind raced, imagining all the possible outcomes. She thought of the desert's rules. The strong survive, the clever survive, and the cautious even more so. She had survived many dangers in her short life already, but this felt different. This was not an animal or a storm. This was a man whose thoughts she could not read, whose intentions were unknown. Then he spoke. His voice was low, steady, and carried across the dry air. "Easy there. I don't mean to hurt you." Maria's breath caught. She had expected anger, threats, a shout. But this voice, this calm, human voice, was something else entirely. She didn't know if she could trust it, but at least it did not sound like the end. She hesitated. Could she risk listening? Could she risk staying still? She weighed her options and realized there were none. The canyon had closed in, the shadows lengthened, and the world around her felt immense and unforgiving. She nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if saying, "I will stay, but do not come closer. You must be tired." "Come, there's water nearby," he said, pointing to a small hidden spring tucked in a shaded alcove. Maria's heart leapt. Water meant life, and life meant a chance to survive. But still, fear clung to her like a shadow. She wanted to run, but she also knew the water could save her. She made a small, cautious step toward the spring, eyes never leaving the stranger. As she approached, she noticed details she hadn't before. The man was weathered, his clothes worn from long days on the trail. His boots were dusty, his hands rough but steady. There was a quiet confidence in the way he stood, as if he belonged to the land in a way she never had. And yet he did not strike fear into her the way the stories had suggested he would. He did not make a move to corner her. Instead, he simply observed, watching her carefully, like someone who respected danger but did not rush into it. Maria drank from the spring slowly, letting the cool water soothe her parched throat. She kept her eyes on him the entire time, noting every movement, every twitch of muscle, every shadow on his face. Her mind spun with questions. Who was he? Why had he not attacked her? Could she trust him? And yet, somewhere deep inside, a small cautious thought began to form. Maybe, just maybe, this man was not like the others. The sun dipped lower, and shadows stretched long across the canyon floor. Maria knew she could not stay here forever. Night would come, and with it, new dangers. Predators of all kinds, human, animal, emerged after dark. She felt the weight of exhaustion pressing down on her, muscles trembling from the day's run. Still, she did not move to flee. Her curiosity, mingled with survival instinct, kept her rooted near the spring. The man finally spoke again. "You're safe, for now. Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you." His words, repeated, held a strange promise. Maria's heart still raced, but her fear began to shift slightly, tempered by the reality that he had not attacked. She could not yet trust him fully, but she could see that he had chosen not to harm her, and in this wild, unforgiving land, that alone was enough to give her a small, fragile sense of hope. For the first time that day, Maria allowed herself to breathe a little easier. The canyon, the dust, the blazing sun, all of it still loomed large and threatening, but she had survived the immediate danger. And while she did not yet know the man's intentions, she realized that surviving sometimes meant waiting, watching, and trusting in one's own instincts. As the evening sky deepened into shades of purple and gold, Maria sat near the spring, keeping a careful eye on the cowboy. She did not yet know what the future held, but she knew one thing. Tonight, she was alive. And in a land where survival was never guaranteed, that was everything. Maria stayed by the spring, her body trembling with a mixture of exhaustion and adrenaline. The water had refreshed her, but it had also reminded her of her vulnerability. She realized that she could not stay in the open for long. The desert night would bring a chill, and predators, both human and animal, would move quietly in the shadows. Every sound now made her jump. The rustle of leaves, the distant cry of a bird, even the soft whisper of wind over the rocks. The cowboy, whose name she still did not know, remained nearby, his posture relaxed but alert. He did not make a move to approach her, but neither did he leave. He seemed content to observe from a distance, as though trying to understand her before taking any action. Maria could feel the weight of his gaze, steady and unflinching, and it made her uneasy. She was not used to being watched in this way. Among her people, she had learned to read eyes, to understand intentions, but this man was a puzzle she could not decipher. Minutes passed like hours, and Maria's mind raced. She tried to recall every story she had been told as a child, every tale of Apache women who had faced strangers, some who had been hurt, others who had survived. She thought of her mother's words, repeated often. Trust carefully, but always trust yourself first. She knew that her instincts were her best tool. But right now, every instinct screamed at her to be cautious, to keep her distance, to watch for any hint of danger. Finally, the cowboy spoke again, his voice calm, low, and deliberate. "I have food. Will you come?" The words were simple, but they carried a weight Maria could not ignore. She hesitated, unsure whether to accept the offer. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but fear weighed heavier. She had learned to survive on the land, to find berries, roots, and small animals, but the desert could be cruel, and she was tired, so very tired. After a long pause, she took a careful step toward him. Her eyes never left his face, watching for any hint of aggression. He did not move to block her path, did not make a sudden gesture. He simply stood there, watching, waiting, as if to reassure her that she could take this step without immediate danger. Her heart pounded, every muscle in her body tense, but she forced herself forward. Each step was deliberate, measured, cautious. As she approached, Maria noticed small details she had missed before. The cowboy's hands were rough, calloused from years of hard work, yet there was a gentleness in the way he held his rifle, not threatening but protective, almost as if he were guarding the land and its creatures rather than planning harm. His boots were worn but clean, and his clothes, though dusty, were patched carefully, showing pride in his appearance despite the hardships of life on the frontier. When she reached him, he offered a small pouch filled with bread and dried meat. Maria's stomach growled, and she accepted it with a nod, keeping her distance. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, knowing that food could be a rare comfort in the harsh desert. As she ate, she watched him carefully, noticing how he moved, how he breathed, how he seemed attuned to the land around them. He did not appear to be a man who would harm her without reason, yet she remained cautious. Trust, she knew, was not something to give lightly. After she had eaten, the cowboy motioned toward a small shaded area near a rock overhang. "You should rest," he said softly. "It's safer here for the night." Could she trust him enough to accept his offer? Every instinct told her to remain on alert, but her body was weary, aching from running all day and from the constant tension of fear. She finally nodded, moving slowly toward the shaded rock. As she settled herself, the man remained at a respectful distance, watching her but not crowding her space. Maria could feel the strange tension between fear and relief building inside her. She was still unsure of his intentions, yet a part of her could not help but notice the way he seemed to respect her presence, giving her room while maintaining vigilance. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Most men she had encountered in stories, in raids, or in the scattered settlements of the plains would have acted with force, without hesitation. But this man, he was different. Hours passed, and the sky darkened into a deep, star-filled night. The desert air cooled, and the soft sounds of nocturnal creatures filled the canyon. Maria lay on the hard ground, trying to rest, but sleep was slow to come. Her mind kept returning to the cowboy, to his calm presence, and to the questions that gnawed at her. Why hadn't he attacked? What was he planning? Could a man like him truly be trusted? Then, without warning, the silence of the night was broken by a distant howl. Maria's body stiffened, heart hammering. The howl came again, closer this time, and she realized it was a coyote. Her hand went to her side instinctively, though she had nothing to defend herself with. She could feel the panic rising, the fear threatening to overwhelm her once more. But the cowboy's voice cut through her terror, calm and commanding. "Stay still. It's nothing you can't handle if you keep your wits." His words, simple and steady, reminded her that she was not entirely alone. Even in this strange, unpredictable desert, there was someone who might help, someone whose presence offered protection, if only in the smallest measure. She took a deep breath, letting the sound of his voice anchor her, letting the fear recede just enough for her to think clearly. The night dragged on, and Maria gradually felt herself relaxing slightly. She realized that, despite the danger, despite the unknown, she was beginning to see a different side of the cowboy. He was not cruel, not reckless, not a threat in a way she had imagined. There was patience in his actions, thoughtfulness in his words, and a respect for her autonomy that she had not expected. It was confusing, unsettling, and strangely comforting all at once. By the time the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky, Maria had managed to get some rest, though she remained alert. The cowboy, too, had not left her side, and she noticed the care in his movements, the way he kept watch over the canyon, scanning for danger. For the first time since she had been separated from her family, she felt a tiny spark of safety. Not complete safety, not the kind of comfort she had known as a child, but enough to give her hope. When the sun rose, painting the canyon walls in brilliant gold, the cowboy finally spoke again. "You've been through a lot. I can't promise what the future holds, but you're alive, and you'll make it through today, too." His voice was calm, reassuring, yet there was a firmness in it that made Maria realize he was capable of action if needed. Maria nodded, understanding that she could not fully let her guard down, but that she could allow herself to trust him just enough to survive. The delicate balance of fear and trust had begun, and though she did not know where it would lead, she understood that this moment, this cautious alliance, was the first step in finding safety. As they prepared to move from the spring, Maria studied him closely. She still did not know his intentions fully, but she could see that he had chosen not to harm her, and perhaps, just perhaps, there was more to him than she had feared. Her journey, it seemed, was far from over, and the man beside her was now a part of that journey, an unpredictable, mysterious part that could change everything about her future. The canyon was quiet as they began to walk together, each step measured and careful. Maria kept her distance but observed closely, learning from his movements, his gestures, and the way he seemed to navigate the terrain with ease. She realized that survival often required more than just strength or speed. It required understanding, caution, and sometimes the courage to trust when it felt impossible. By the time they reached a safer part of the canyon, Maria had begun to see the cowboy in a new light. He was no longer just a figure of fear. He was a man who had shown patience, care, and restraint. Though her heart still beat rapidly, the tension of the night had softened, replaced by a cautious curiosity. She did not yet know what the future held, but for the first time since her separation from her family, she felt a small glimmer of hope. And so, as the desert stretched endlessly before them, Maria and the cowboy moved forward together, two strangers bound by circumstance, caution, and the quiet understanding that survival often depended on alliances formed in the most unexpected ways. The next few days passed slowly for Maria. Each morning the desert greeted her with a burning sun, stretching across endless plains of golden sand and jagged rocks. Yet, beneath the harshness, she began noticing small, delicate signs of life, the soft rustle of grass in the morning wind, the song of a lone bird, the sparkle of dew on a cactus. These small wonders reminded her that the world, though dangerous, was still alive, and she was still alive too. The cowboy, whose name she had learned was Tom, had remained near her, patient and watchful. Every movement he made seemed deliberate, calculated, yet gentle. He showed her how to find small springs hidden beneath rocks, how to recognize edible plants, and how to track animals without startling them. Maria was careful, always alert, but she began to notice a quiet kindness in his actions. When he handed her water or food, he did so without a hint of condescension, as if she were his equal rather than someone to be controlled. At first, Maria could not understand this. She had grown up hearing stories of settlers and cowboys, men who were rough, aggressive, and often cruel. How could one be different? She watched Tom closely, studying his expressions and movements. She noticed that when he spoke to her, he did not raise his voice. When he gestured, he did so clearly, without sudden or threatening motions. Slowly, a part of her began to believe that he might genuinely mean her no harm. One morning, they were traveling along a narrow canyon path, the walls towering above them, casting long shadows in the early sun. Maria's feet were sore and her body ached from constant vigilance. She stumbled slightly over a loose rock, and Tom immediately reached out a hand to steady her. His fingers were strong but careful, not gripping too tightly, and she felt an odd warmth at the contact. She pulled back slightly, unsure what she was feeling. Was it relief, or something else she had never felt before? "You're stronger than you think," Tom said softly, his voice calm, encouraging. "Even when you're scared, you keep moving forward." Maria nodded, unsure what to say. His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that touched something deep within her. She realized that he was not only observing her survival skills, but also trying to build her confidence. The thought was unsettling and strange, yet comforting. As they moved through the canyon, Tom shared stories of his own life. He spoke of the hardships he had faced growing up on the frontier, of lost friends, long trails, and nights spent under the stars with only the wind in his thoughts for company. Maria listened carefully, noting the honesty in his voice. He did not boast, did not exaggerate, and did not try to impress her. He simply shared, as though his past were a map guiding him forward. Maria found herself opening up in small ways too. She spoke of her family, of the traditions of her people, and of the lessons her mother had taught her about the land, about survival, and about courage. At first she was hesitant, unsure how much to reveal to a stranger, but Tom listened patiently, never interrupting, never judging, and slowly she began to feel that she could share her story. It was an unusual sensation, trust, small and fragile, growing quietly between them. The days that followed were filled with moments of shared survival and quiet observation. Tom showed her how to light a fire even in damp conditions, how to read the tracks of animals in the sand, and how to find the hidden springs that sustain life in the desert. Maria taught him how to recognize the herbs that could soothe pain or prevent sickness, how to move quietly without alerting prey, and how to watch the skies for changing weather. They relied on each other not only for safety but for knowledge, and slowly a bond began to form that neither had expected. One evening, as the sun dipped behind distant hills, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and gold, they sat together near a small fire. The air was cool, and the soft crackle of flames provided a sense of comfort. Maria had noticed that Tom rarely spoke unless necessary, yet when he did, his words were thoughtful and deliberate. That night, he looked at her with a quiet intensity and said, "You have courage, Maria. Not just the courage to survive, but the courage to trust when it's hard." Maria felt a strange flutter in her chest. His words were unlike anything she had heard before. She had always been praised for her skill, her strength, or her intelligence, but courage to trust? That was new. She looked at him carefully, trying to understand what he meant. Did he truly see her not just as a survivor, but as someone more? The thought was both terrifying and comforting. The night grew colder, and Maria wrapped herself in a small blanket Tom had given her. She watched him as he kept watch, his eyes scanning the horizon, alert to any sign of danger. The way he moved, confident and careful, made her feel safer than she had felt in days. She realized that she was beginning to rely on him, not just for physical protection, but for guidance and reassurance. It was a strange feeling, one she had never experienced before, and it both excited and frightened her. Over the next few days, their partnership deepened. They hunted together, moving silently across the desert, reading the signs of the land, and relying on each other's instincts. Maria noticed that Tom began to smile occasionally, small, genuine smiles that reached his eyes. She realized that she had begun to anticipate them, that his presence, once a source of fear, had become a source of comfort. She still remained cautious, still kept her guard up, but the fear that had dominated her every thought was slowly being replaced by a quiet curiosity and even admiration. One afternoon, as they rested in the shade of a rock formation, a sudden noise startled them. A small herd of wild goats had appeared on a distant ridge, their hooves clattering against the rocks. Maria instinctively crouched, preparing to observe, and Tom mirrored her movements. Together, they watched the herd, learning its patterns, its behavior. They exchanged no words, only glances, and Maria realized that she had begun to understand him without speaking. Their bond had grown beyond fear, beyond necessity. It was a partnership built on observation, patience, and mutual respect. As the days turned into a week, Maria found herself thinking about Tom more often. She wondered about his life before the desert, about the choices he had made, and about the reasons he had not harmed her when he could have. She remembered the fear she had felt when she first saw him, the terror of being alone and trapped, and now that fear seemed distant, replaced by a complicated mix of trust, curiosity, and a desire to understand this man who had become her companion. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the desert floor, Tom spoke again. "You've survived more than most," he said quietly. "You've faced fear, hunger, and the unknown, and yet you're still here. That's something few people can claim." Maria felt a warmth in her chest. His words were not just praise, they were recognition. He saw her, not just as a frightened girl, but as a strong, capable woman who had endured much. Maria looked at him, and for the first time she saw something she had not expected. Respect. Not just for her abilities, but for her spirit. She realized that their relationship was changing, evolving beyond the simple dynamic of survivor and protector. They were becoming companions in the truest sense, learning from each other, relying on each other, and beginning to understand one another in ways words could not fully capture. That night, as they slept under the stars, Maria felt a sense of peace she had not known in days. The desert, though still vast and unforgiving, felt less threatening. She had found an ally in Tom, someone who had proven that not all strangers meant harm. The bond they were forming was fragile, cautious, and new, but it was real. And for Maria, that realization was more powerful than any weapon, any skill, or any survival trick she had learned. As dawn approached, Maria awoke to the soft light of morning and the quiet presence of Tom watching over her. She felt a small spark of hope, a sense that she could face the challenges ahead with his guidance and support. The fear that had dominated her thoughts for so long had not disappeared entirely, but it had softened, replaced by something new, a sense of trust, tentative and careful, but growing stronger with each passing day. And so, as the desert stretched endlessly before them, Maria and Tom continued their journey together. Each day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new moments of connection. Their bond, forged in fear and necessity, was beginning to evolve into something deeper. Maria did not yet know what the future held, but she understood that she had found not only a protector, but a companion, a teacher, and perhaps, in time, something even more profound. The days had grown into weeks, and Maria could feel a shift within herself that she had never expected. The fear that had once dominated every thought, every breath, had softened, replaced by something new. A cautious curiosity, a growing sense of trust, and at times a warmth she didn't fully understand. Life in the desert was still harsh, the sun unrelenting and the nights bitterly cold, But now she faced it alongside Tom. He was no longer just a stranger who had spared her life. He had become a teacher, a companion, and in small, quiet ways, a friend. Tom had taught her many things during their travels. He showed her how to track the paths of animals across the sands, how to tell the difference between tracks of a harmless creature and a dangerous one, and how to find water in places that seemed dry and barren. Maria had learned to watch the skies for signs of changing weather, to feel the wind and know its direction, and to listen carefully for sounds that might reveal hidden threats. Each lesson strengthened her confidence, and with each day she realized how much she had underestimated her own abilities. Yet, as she learned to survive, she also began to notice the gentler qualities in Tom. It was not just that he protected her or taught her survival skills, it was the care with which he did so. When he offered her food, he did it without condescension, without expectation. When he guided her over treacherous ground, he adjusted his pace to match hers, never pushing, never rushing. Maria felt a quiet respect growing for him, and alongside it, a strange, unfamiliar feeling, something akin to admiration. One afternoon, they came across a small grove of trees near a hidden stream. The shade was a relief from the scorching sun, and the sound of water flowing over rocks was soothing. Tom gestured toward the stream. "Stay close," he said, "but take some time to rest. You've been pushing yourself hard." Maria nodded, grateful for the brief respite. She knelt by the water, letting the cool liquid run over her hands, washing away the dust and sweat of the day. Tom settled a short distance away, leaning against a tree and keeping watch. Maria watched him as he scanned the horizon, alert but relaxed. She realized that his strength was not only in his knowledge of the land or his skill with a rifle, but in his ability to remain calm and patient, even in uncertainty. Well, he seemed to possess a quiet confidence, a steadiness that reassured her without words. For the first time, she felt that she could truly rely on him, not just for survival, but for guidance and support. As the days passed, their partnership grew stronger. Maria began to share more about herself, about her past, and about the traditions of her people. She told him stories of her childhood, of the elders' wisdom, and of the lessons she had learned about the land, about courage, and about perseverance. Tom listened with genuine interest, never interrupting, never dismissing her words. In return, he shared more about his own life, the struggles of growing up on the frontier, the hardships he had faced, and the few moments of joy he had experienced along the way. Through these exchanges, Maria began to see Tom not just as a protector, but as a person with depth, experience, and emotion. She realized that he had chosen to treat her with respect not because he had to, but because he wanted to. His actions were deliberate, thoughtful, and consistent, and over time they began to break down the walls of fear that had once surrounded her heart. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, they sat together near a small fire. The air was cool and the fire's warmth was comforting. Maria had been quiet for a long while, lost in thought, when Tom spoke softly. "You've come a long way," he said. "Not just across this land, but in who you are. You've faced fear, hunger, and uncertainty, and yet you've kept moving forward." Maria felt a warmth in her chest at his words. They were not merely observations. They were recognition. He saw her courage, her strength, and her determination. For the first time since she had been separated from her family, she felt truly acknowledged, not just as a survivor, but as someone capable, resilient, and worthy of respect. She met his gaze, and in that quiet moment she sensed a connection that went beyond words, beyond fear, and even beyond the necessity of survival. In the following days, Maria and Tom faced new challenges. They navigated treacherous canyons, avoided dangerous wildlife, and sought shelter from sudden storms. Each trial tested their skills and their ability to work together. Maria noticed how instinctively they had begun to anticipate each other's movements, how their unspoken communication allowed them to move efficiently and safely. The bond between them was no longer just one of survival. It had evolved into a partnership built on trust, respect, and growing affection. One afternoon, as they crossed a wide plain, they encountered a small band of travelers. The group was friendly, but the desert was unforgiving, and Maria felt a surge of anxiety. She clutched Tom's arm instinctively, seeking reassurance. He squeezed her hand gently, a small but deliberate gesture that communicated safety. His presence reminded her that she was not alone, that she had someone she could rely on, and that together they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. As night fell and they set up camp, Maria noticed how Tom attended to her needs quietly. He gathered firewood, prepared food, and ensured that she was comfortable and safe. She realized that his care was not a burden or an obligation. It was a choice, a demonstration of his regard for her well-being. The realization stirred a complex mix of emotions within her. gratitude, admiration, and a budding sense of closeness she had never anticipated. One evening, as they sat by the fire under a sky full of stars, Maria spoke hesitantly. "Tom," she said softly, I never expected someone to treat me like this. To care, to watch, to teach, without wanting something in return. Tom looked at her, his expression gentle. "I don't expect anything from you," he replied. "I respect you. That's enough for me. You've shown strength and courage, and I want to help you, not because I have to, but because I choose to." His words, simple and honest, touched her deeply. She realized that trust could grow even in the harshest conditions, that care and respect could exist even among strangers in a dangerous land. Slowly, cautiously, she allowed herself to feel something she had not allowed before. A quiet hope, a sense of safety, and perhaps the beginnings of affection. The following days continued in much the same way. Maria and Tom traveled together, shared meals, taught each other survival skills, and faced the challenges of the desert side by side. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day, a delicate mixture of trust, respect, and mutual reliance. Maria began to understand that Tom was not only her protector but also her partner in the truest sense, someone who valued her presence, her knowledge, and her strength. One morning, as they prepared to cross a particularly treacherous section of canyon, Maria looked at Tom with a mixture of determination and curiosity. "I've learned so much from you," she said, "but I want to show you something too, something I know that might help us survive." "I'm listening," he said. Maria led him to a hidden patch of desert plants, showing him which herbs could be used for medicine, which roots could provide sustenance, and how to identify signs of water beneath the soil. Tom watched carefully, asking questions and taking in every detail. He respected her knowledge, treating it as valuable and necessary rather than trivial or unimportant. Maria realized that their partnership was no longer one-sided. It was a true collaboration, each learning from the other, each relying on the other's strengths. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in warm golden light, Maria and Tom settled down for the night. Maria felt a profound sense of connection, a feeling that she had never experienced before. The fear that had once consumed her was now tempered by trust and companionship. She realized that she had come to rely on Tom not just for survival, but for guidance, support, and even a sense of belonging. That night, as they lay beneath the stars, Maria thought about how far she had come. From a frightened, alone girl trapped in the desert to a strong, capable woman who had forged a partnership with someone she had once feared. She understood that her journey was far from over, but she also knew that she was no longer alone. Tom had become more than a protector. He had become a companion, a teacher, and perhaps, in time, something even more meaningful. And so, as the desert night stretched endlessly above them, Maria allowed herself to rest, to breathe, and to hope. She did not yet know what the future held, but she understood one thing. The bond she and Tom had formed was real, strong, and unbreakable. Together they could face anything, the harshness of the land, the dangers of the frontier, and whatever else life might throw their way. And for Maria, that realization was more precious than any treasure, more valuable than any skill, and more powerful than fear itself. The desert stretched endlessly before Maria and Tom, a vast land of rugged cliffs, open plains, and hidden springs. The sun was rising, casting a warm golden light across the sand and rock, and Maria felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. Their journey together had been long and challenging, filled with moments of fear, discovery, and learning, and now, after weeks of shared hardship, she began to see the possibility of something more, a life not just of survival, but of companionship, trust, and perhaps even love. Tom moved ahead slightly, scanning the horizon as he always did, alert for any danger. Maria followed at a careful pace, feeling stronger and more confident than she had in weeks. The lessons he had taught her, the tracking of animals, finding water, reading the winds, had become second nature, and she realized just how much she had grown. She was no longer the frightened, desperate girl who had stumbled into the canyon alone. "I would be so happy." She was a survivor, capable, skilled, and wise in the ways of the land. As they walked, Tom glanced back at her with a small smile. "You've changed," he said quietly, almost as if to himself. "Stronger, sharper, more aware. I knew you had it in you, but I didn't realize how much until now." Maria felt her cheeks warm at his words. She had learned to trust his observations, to accept his guidance, and yet there was something in the way he said this that felt personal, like he truly saw her for who she was. She smiled back, hesitant but genuine. "I've learned a lot from you too," she replied. "Not just about the land, but about trust and courage and staying calm, even when everything feels impossible. Tom nodded, his expression thoughtful. And that's just as important as knowing how to survive. Strength isn't only about fighting or running. It's about keeping your mind clear and your heart steady. You've done that better than anyone I've ever known. Maria felt a swell of emotion. His words, honest and sincere, made her feel seen, respected, and appreciated in a way she had never experienced before. She realized that the bond between them had grown into something more profound than survival. It was a partnership of equals built on trust, care, and understanding. And, she admitted to herself, she cared for him in ways she had not anticipated. That evening, as the sun dipped behind distant mountains and painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Tom suggested they set up camp near a small grove of trees by a hidden stream. The area was sheltered, quiet, and safe, a perfect place to rest and prepare for the next part of their journey. Maria worked alongside him, gathering firewood, setting up a small shelter, and arranging their supplies. They moved together naturally, their actions coordinated without words, each anticipating the other's needs. Once the fire was lit, they sat together on a flat rock, the warmth of the flames comforting against the cool evening air. Maria noticed how the flickering light played across Tom's face, highlighting the rugged lines of a man who had lived hard but fair. There was a gentleness in his eyes, a quiet strength that reassured her, and she felt a deep sense of gratitude for his presence. "You know," Tom said after a long silence, "I didn't expect to find anyone like you out here. I thought I'd find danger, fear, maybe anger, but not someone like you. Brave, clever, and alive in a way that makes everything else seem smaller." His words were not only kind, but filled with admiration, a recognition of who she truly was. She had faced countless dangers and hardships, yet in that moment she felt seen in a way she had never experienced before. I didn't think anyone could understand," she admitted softly. "Not after all I've been through, not after everything that happened when I was separated from my people." Tom reached out, his hand hovering near hers for a brief moment before gently resting on her arm. "I do understand," he said quietly. "I see what you've survived, and I see who you are. That's why I've stayed. That's why I want you to stay, not because you're helpless, but because you're incredible." Maria felt a tear slip down her cheek, not from sadness, but from relief and gratitude. She had feared strangers, feared being taken advantage of, feared the dangers of the frontier, but this man had shown her that trust, respect, and care could exist even in the harshest places. She looked at him, her heart full, and realized that she had come to care for him deeply as well. The next morning they continued their journey together, moving with purpose and confidence. Each step was a shared effort, each decision made together. They hunted small game, gathered water, and navigated the desert terrain with precision. Maria's skills had grown, but so had Tom's appreciation for her abilities. He relied on her knowledge as much as she relied on his, and their partnership had evolved into something truly equal and balanced. One afternoon, as they rested beneath the shade of a rocky outcrop, Tom turned to her with a serious expression. "Maria," he said, "I've been thinking we've been through so much together. You've trusted me, taught me, survived with me, and I realize now that I don't want this journey to end. I want you in my life, not just as a companion, but as someone I can rely on, someone I care for deeply." She had suspected feelings for him, had felt the bond growing stronger each day, but hearing him speak so openly made her heart race. "Tom," she whispered, "I care for you too. I never expected this, but I know it's true." Tom smiled, a mix of relief and happiness in his eyes. He took her hand gently in his, feeling the warmth and strength in her grip. "Then," he said, "let's not waste another day wondering what might be. I want to take care of you, to face the future together, and to make a life where we both belong." I separated from her people, alone and frightened in the desert, but through the hardships, the lessons, and the shared struggles, she had found someone who valued her, respected her, and cared for her as an equal. She nodded, tears of happiness glistening in her eyes. "Yes, Tom. I want that too. I want to face the future with you." The days that followed were filled with quiet planning and shared joy. They worked together to build a small shelter near a reliable water source, gathered food, and made the desert their home. Every action they took was in harmony, each anticipating the other's needs and supporting one another in ways both big and small. Maria found herself laughing again, a sound she had not made freely in weeks, and Tom smiled at her joy, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. One evening, as the sun set in fiery hues and the stars began to twinkle above, Tom knelt beside Maria and spoke in a voice full of sincerity. "Maria, you've shown me courage, strength, and heart. I don't want to just survive this land. I want to live it with you. Will you be my wife?" Maria's eyes filled with tears, her heart overflowing with emotion. She thought of everything they had been through, the fear, the uncertainty, the lessons, and the growing trust, and she knew, without a doubt, that she wanted to spend her life with him. "Yes, Tom," she whispered, her voice trembling with happiness. "Yes, I will." The union was simple, just the two of them under the vast desert sky, with the stars as witnesses and the gentle breeze as their music. There was no grand ceremony, no crowd of witnesses, only the quiet knowledge that they had found each other in the harshest of places and had chosen to build a life together. As the days turned into months, Maria and Tom settled into a rhythm of life in the desert. They hunted, gathered, and explored together, but now there was an added sense of comfort, security, and love. Maria's skills continued to grow, and Tom's respect and admiration for her deepened. They faced challenges together, but now those challenges were shared, met with the knowledge that they could rely on one another completely. Maria often thought back to the day she had first encountered Tom in the canyon, terrified and alone. She could hardly recognize that girl anymore. She had grown stronger, wiser, and braver, not only because of the land and its trials, but because of the man who had chosen to protect, respect, and love her. Their bond was forged in fear and necessity, but it evolved into trust, companionship, and a deep, enduring love. And so, in the vast, unforgiving desert, Maria and Tom built a life together. A life of shared struggles and shared triumphs, of mutual respect and care, of laughter and quiet moments under the stars. They were no longer two strangers brought together by circumstance. They were partners, companions, and ultimately, a family. And for Maria, who had once feared for her life in the canyon, this was the greatest triumph of all. Not just survival, but the discovery of trust, love, and a future filled with hope.